Reverend Dr. Elliot Robinson, host of the R3 podcast, as well as the Creative Tension podcast. Where is Kamala? That's the question of the hour. I keep seeing it over and over again. I see it in places. I hear interviews, people posting in social media. Where is Kamala? Where is Kamala? Why won't she come and save us from the evil Donald Trump? Well, let's kind of look back at the journey that the former vice president had, and perhaps why she is giving zero you-know-whats in this particular moment. Now, remember, she ran for president, and she ran against Joe Biden in the primary. During her initial campaign, she was saddled with misinformation and disinformation about her record as a DA and a state's attorney, and some said that her campaign also wasn't run as efficiently or as seamlessly as others. And so she ended up dropping out the race. She then became selected as the VP candidate to run along with Joseph Biden. Now, in his selection of Harris as his VP candidate, there was always the belief, the thought, the whispers out there that Biden would only serve one term. And so therefore, him running, her being his running mate, he would serve for one term, and she would then be serving in an incumbent position for president for the 2024 election. Folks came out, they supported the Biden-Harris campaign, he won. In response to January 6th, Biden then made a turn that may have provided some tension, this is just my surmising, in sitting in the seat of the presidency. He decided that the country would turn the page, and that in order to create unity amongst the country, he would not formally seek to prosecute Donald Trump for treason. Now, given her prosecutorial history, I would imagine that may not have sat well with Vice President Harris. Within 6 months of being in office, suddenly various and sundry tabloids and newspapers were running hit pieces on Harris. And they were already beginning to float names of individuals who would be running in the 2024 election. So these were basically Democratic candidates probably being put out by Democratic operatives that were already undermining Harris within 6 months of her being the vice president. Biden pretty much had her in low profile positions throughout the time in office. Doesn't mean that what she was doing wasn't important, but they were low profile issues in terms of media. And so that didn't mean that they weren't important, but he was also not positioning her for a run in 2024. He was not. Why? Because Biden had already decided that he was going to run again in 2024. So basically, he kind of did her dirty. He used her to get into office to help push his campaign in order to be able to get women voters, African-American voters, from some of the big states. He didn't do right. And so doing her dirty until his campaign basically was fighting for its life. And we can sit here and surmise that whether it was or wasn't, it absolutely was. He was in somewhat of a decline in terms of his health. I'm not going to get into the particulars of his mental state because I'm not a psychologist, a psychiatrist, or a neurologist. But it was clear that he was not quite as sharp as he had been earlier in his presidency. So, as usual, break glass in case of emergency. They pull out Vice President Kamala Harris, who they had not been positioning for this run. And she basically did an outstanding job running for president. Some will say, well, she wasn't the primary candidate, and so therefore she shouldn't have. And yet she still took on that opportunity and the obligation, basically, in order to run for the presidency. She laid out all the issues that were at stake. She destroyed Trump in the debate, and she had an actual platform. And I want us to listen to this little clip that D.L. Hughley put together of all the ways in which she warned America about Donald Trump, and they've all pretty much come to fruition because she knew what the heck she was talking about. She was a DA, she was state's attorney, she was a senator, and she was the vice president. So let's listen to this clip and we'll get back to why maybe she just said, I've had enough.
2025.
The former president said that's not true.
He says everything. Come on, are we really taking his word for it? hate to say it, I told you so. Tariffs on all imports that he has described would be a 20% sales tax, in essence, on basic necessities for the average American worker. I hate to say it, I told you so. They even want to eliminate the Department of Education and end Head Start, which of course would take away preschool from hundreds of thousands of our children. I hate to say it, I told you so. Otherwise, Putin would be sitting in Kyiv with his eyes on the rest of Europe, starting with Poland. And why don't you tell the 800,000 Polish Americans right here in Pennsylvania how quickly you would give up for the sake of favor and what you think is a friendship with what is known to be a dictator who would eat you for lunch. I hate to say it, I told you so. Donald Trump intends to cut Social Security and Medicare. He intends to give tax breaks to billionaires and big corporations and make working families foot the bill. I hate to say it, I told you so. Ask Donald Trump what his plan is for black America. Democracy. You know what he says he'll do? Terminate the Constitution of the United States.
That's right.
Let me remind folks. You know what's in the Constitution of the United States? The Fourth Amendment, which protects you against unreasonable searches and seizures. The Fifth Amendment, the Sixth Amendment, the 14th Amendment. Which in most of those amendments, one thing or another was about a movement spurred by black people to ensure that we would be equally protected under the law. I hate to say it, I told you so. There is a huge contrast in this election. Donald Trump has said he will be a dictator on day one. I hate to say it.
So then as the election is drawing close, Biden really didn't campaign for her, and I get it. He was upset. He wanted to run again. But he did something that I just thought, at the time that he did it, I said, I can't believe this man did this. Within a week of the election, as all of the racial animus in the Trump campaign is just going to next and next levels, he has his little mini Nazi party in MSG, and the quote-unquote, I believe it was the quote-unquote comedian, makes the comment about Puerto Rico being basically a floating island of garbage. Biden then decides now was the time for him to come out and to say something. And he riled up their base with his comment that the only garbage I see floating out there are Trump supporters. Why would you say that? They were already fighting for their lives. They were already at the point of almost conceding defeat. And you riled them up. He riled them up right before the election. And that was a boost that kind of began to get more of their voters out. Nobody wants to be called garbage, even if your candidate is not the best candidate, or even if your candidate is garbage. You don't want to be called garbage because now you have to defend your garbage. So she loses in a statistical anomaly-driven election where there were definitely states, especially those swing states, that seemed as if it was not likely that the count would have gone the way that it did without some manipulation. She bows out gracefully. Should she have fought? Perhaps she should have fought. But the reality is that would have been Biden's call to make through his DOJ. We do know now, given that being the narcissist that he is, Donald Trump has to let you know when he's gotten over on you. And so he has been bragging about the fact that Elon basically helped to fix the election. So we know for a fact, given how he is, he can't help himself, that perhaps, there might have been a reason to fight the election results. But again, that would have been, you would probably say, well, she's the VP. She could have pushed it also. Well, at that point, given the course of events, she probably had enough. And she said, you know what? Let me leave y'all to your own devices, and then you can deal with this mess as you so choose. So where's Kamala? Minding Kamala's damn business. That's what she's doing. And enjoying the life that she has left in her latter years. And I can't fault her for that. There are others who could be out fighting, and then they go out and fight. But she's not a queen. She's not a fix-all. She tried to tell the American people in the most honest and simple ways possible what it would mean to elect Donald Trump as the president of the United States. Her bona fides were she was probably the single most qualified person to ever run for president of the United States of America. And America said, I'll take the racist guy with all the felonies. So it is what it is. She's enjoying herself. She's enjoying her life. And I can't say that I'll blame her. So Kamala, chillax, enjoy yourself, and enjoy your retirement from public life.